Hey guys, come on in. It is Friday, so you already know I am here to share with you the top lessons from the week. My name is Stephanie Kerr, and this is Seasons with Stef. Today, I want to talk about how to deal with opposition, especially when you're in a building season. So, for those of you who watch, welcome. For those of you who watch my IG stories, you will know that I just completed 2 writing courses yesterday, and they went really, really well. And today on the live, I was thinking to myself, I think I want to talk about just some lessons I was able to pull from the course that can apply to life. And they were actually some really great lessons. Perhaps at some point I might share them in a story or in a post. But based on 2 conversations I had with 2 separate people this week, I actually want to talk about what do we do? What's an appropriate response when we're trying to build something? Let's say we're trying to build our lives. We're trying to build a business. We're trying to build our families, and we're just constantly facing opposition. What is an appropriate response? So, the first conversation that I had, I was really surprised to just hear the level of opposition that that person had been up against as they are building in this season. And then this morning, I had a completely separate conversation with somebody else, and they shared with me what they were up against, and they asked me, how do you think I should respond? And it made me think of the book of Nehemiah. Now, the book of Nehemiah, welcome, is a powerful tool for us to learn how to deal with opposition. Now, the opposition could look different for different people. So the opposition could be, now you just left a long-term relationship. You are building your life again. You might be building your self-confidence again. You might be building your finances, just building. And here comes the X. Here comes the X to distract you, to be a source of just opposition to what it is you're trying to build. Or let's say you're building a business, and for whatever reason, it just seems like there's just constantly this pushback. There might actually be people who are presenting themselves as enemies, but regardless of what the opposition looks like, as I was speaking to that person earlier today, I said, listen, the book of Nehemiah has the whole blueprint laid out for us. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. Welcome, Mark. That's what I'm going to talk about today. So, like I said, I wasn't planning to, but this is what I think is more needful than what I was going to share. So that's what we're going to pivot to. I'm going to start from chapter 4 all the way to 13 and just point out some lessons that we get. And then I will go specifically into how to deal with opposition / enemies. So lesson number 1 from the book of Nehemiah. And this is a book in the Bible. Number 1, never leave the work of God. Never leave the work that you've been assigned to. Never leave the project that you are focusing on unattended to go defend yourself against accusers and conspirators. Never. That's not what we're doing. Where is that taken from? Nehemiah 6 verse 3. So I, Nehemiah, sent messengers. So he didn't even stop himself. He sent messengers to them saying, I'm doing a great work so that I cannot come down. Why should I leave the work cease, or why should the work cease while I leave it and go down to you? Why would that be an appropriate response? To leave the work that God has assigned me to so that I can come down. And that's actually what I told the person. It was actually like a relationship that we were discussing. And I said, anytime you engage the enemy on his level and on his terms, you choose demotion. Now, we all know what a promotion is, or if we don't, a promotion is when you are taken to a higher level. But in this case, when you engage the enemy on his terms and on his level, you are choosing to agree with demotion in your life. So that is the very first lesson from the book of Nehemiah. We never engage the enemy on his terms and on his level, especially when that requires us to stop focusing on what we are called to focus on to respond to the enemy. Number 2, lesson from the book of Nehemiah. Judge all things spiritually. Walk by faith. Now, I know because we live in a natural world, it's so easy for us to forget that life is spiritual. There's one of my favorite sayings after having read a series of books in the past couple of months. Life is spiritual. Everything that happens, there is a spiritual underpinning, there is a spiritual root. What you see people say, what you see people do, what you see happening in front of you is only the result of something that you can't see. And so you have to judge everything spiritually. So don't get upset. Let's say there's a manager and they just keep coming to you. You're trying to build your life, maybe get your finances into a place where you want them to be. And this is the job where that is happening for you. But here comes this manager. Judge all things spiritually. That's the second lesson. But where do we see this in the book? So a note that I put down here is one offered an out. Nehemiah refused to cower. So let me just go into it because everyone may not be familiar with the book of Nehemiah. So Nehemiah is charged to go back and rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. It's been torn down and many of the people have been taken captive, but God places it on his heart to go back and rebuild. So not only is he rebuilding a city that has been broken down, he's also helping to rebuild a people and a morale that have been broken down. So the city is hopeless and the people are hopeless. That's what he's charged to do. As soon as he gets there, people who do not want to see the advancement of this region and of this people start to get upset. They're like, why is he here to help? Because we're actually invested in the people remaining hopeless, and we're invested in seeing this place remain unbuilt and destroyed. So they're upset. And at a certain point in the story, he gets offered an out. So someone says to him, like, don't even worry about them. Come meet me here. And Nehemiah responds and he's like, why would I cower and why would I run when I know who sent me here? And that's actually something we're going to get into a little bit later on. So that's why this point, when offered an out, Nehemiah refused to enter. Chapter 6, 11, 12. And I, Nehemiah, said, should a man as I flee? Should a man like me run away? And who is there, such as I, who would go into the temple to save his life? That was the out that he was offered, to essentially go into a context where he's not necessarily permitted to be there. He's not a priest. Why would he run to a place where this isn't the context that God has called me to? I will not go in. Verse 12, then I perceived that God had not sent him at all. So this person who's saying, I have a way for you to get out of this opposition, I have a way for you to escape, what he perceives, Nehemiah perceives, hold on, I don't even think that God sent you. You're here offering me solutions, but I don't even feel like God sent you to me. And in fact, it turns out that that person had been hired by his enemies to come and trick him. So I wrote down here, be very wary of people's loyalties. Some people can be bought. So this particular person, their name was Shemaiah, and Shemaiah had been bought in this particular moment. They had allowed themselves to be allied with Nehemiah's enemies to come and get him again. We're in a building season. We're building businesses. We're building families. We're building lives. We're building finances. We're building legacies. We're in a building season. Here comes the enemy. Nothing to do but try to distract you. Try to get your focus to move off of what you are charged to focus on. Offering you outs. But it turns out this person was actually allied with your enemies. So just be very careful. Watch don't just automatically accept the quote-unquote outs that you are offered, especially when they're going to require you to do something that you're not necessarily authorized to do. So that's number 2. So number 1, never leave the work of God unattended to go defend yourself against conspirators and accusers. Number 2, judge all things spiritually. Walk by faith. Walk by faith. Number 3, lesson from the book of Nehemiah. And this is specifically from chapters 4 to 13 because I had already done a study of 1 to 3 previous to this lesson. So number 3, before access is given, especially spiritually, authentication must occur. Authentication must occur. And this is actually something that I'm learning right now in my life. But the lesson that I got is from chapter 7, verse 64. So the context of this particular point is that now they're rebuilding, they're getting things together, they're reassembling a people. He's speaking hope over them. He is showing them what's possible. I know the whole entire situation looks desolate, but here is what I want you to know. It is possible with God. So they're building, and they go through the genealogies of all the people who have come back from captivity and who are now settled in Jerusalem. They're looking through the genealogies to be able to find out where everyone traces back to. And there's a group of people who they cannot find any documentation for. They can't find any authentication for. So here's what they say. Verse 64 of chapter 7. These sought their listing amongst those who were registered by genealogy, but it wasn't found. Therefore, they were excluded. 65. And the governor said to them that they should not eat of the most holy things until the priest could consult with the Urim and the Thummim. So essentially, not until we can verify with God that you should be given access will you be given access. Don't just let people in just because they happen to be there. So before access is given, especially spiritually, authentication must occur. And the final lesson that I'm going to share with you from the book of Nehemiah, just generally speaking, before we go into specifically how to deal with opposition, is this lesson. Despite many years of having neglected God's ways and turning back to him, turning back to him will yield great joy. So for many, many years, they had stopped doing what God wanted them to do. They had stopped living the way that he required them to live. But the moment they turned back, they experienced great joy and great gladness. And that is taken from Nehemiah 8 verse 17. So the whole assembly of those who had returned from the captivity made booths. This is the festival of booths, and sat down under the booths. For since the days of Joshua the son of Nun, Moses' assistant, until that day the children of Israel had not done so, and there was great gladness. So those are the 4 lessons that I want to leave with you today. And now let me resume them real quick. Number 1, never leave the work of God unattended to go defend yourself against conspirators and accusers. Number 2, judge all things spiritually. Walk by faith. Don't just automatically think that an out is being presented, you should take it. It may not be sent by God. Number 3, before access is granted, especially spiritually, authentication must occur. And number 4, despite many years of neglecting walking with God, the moment you turn back, there will be great joy. There will be gladness. He is the source of peace. If you're watching this and you're not a believer, you haven't accepted Jesus Christ, just know he is the source of peace. But let's go into how to deal with enemies or oppositions as you are building. What do we learn from Nehemiah and his response? The very first thing that I learned was that you have to know with certainty who has commissioned and sent you, and declare victory boldly. That's what I noticed Nehemiah did. At the very onset, here come these people to discourage him even before the work has started. They only heard that he had come back to start rebuilding, but they wanted to discourage him at the onset. And here's what he said. Chapter 2, verse 20. So I answered them and said to them, the God of heaven himself will prosper us. Therefore, we his servants will arise and build. You have no heritage, no right, or memorial in Jerusalem. So Nehemiah knew who had sent him. He knew who had commissioned him to be there working. And he was confident that the one who told him to be there would assure his victory. So he was just like, I'm not even going to worry about the opposition that you're trying to put up, because I know who sent me here, and I'm going to declare boldly that he will complete the good work that he started in me. So that's number 1. Number 2, call upon God. Ask him to deal with your enemies. This is such a privilege that we have as children of God. We don't have to fight on our own behalf. We can literally sit back and allow God to fight for us. And so that's what we should do. That's what Nehemiah did. Chapter 4, verse 4 to 5. Hear, O our God, for we are despised. Turn their reproach on their own heads, and give them as plunder to the land of captivity. So Nehemiah is just like, God, deal with them. Like, Lord, I have a couple ideas of what should happen to them, but I'm going to let you deal with it. And I just ask you to deal with it as you see fit. Number 5, verse 5, I should say. He says, do not cover their iniquity. So don't cover their wrongdoing. I know you're a merciful God, and I'm coming to you right now. But don't cover their iniquity, and don't let their sin be blotted out from before you. They have provoked you to anger before the builders. So again, Nehemiah was very clear. We're in a building season. I can't afford to stop and deal with these enemies myself. I'm just going to let you deal with them. So that was the second thing that we learned. Number 3, use the weapon of prayer and be watchful. Chapter 4, 8 and 9. And all of them conspired together to come and attack Jerusalem and create confusion. As I was looking over my notes this morning, welcome. One thing that I noticed with this particular verse that I didn't notice before was that the enemy is not just there to steal, kill, and destroy. He also comes to bring confusion and chaos. Because when you're confused and there's chaos, what are you not doing? You're not building anymore. Now you're just trying to put out fires. You're not building anymore. So they decided, verse 9, nevertheless, we made our prayer to our God. Why? Chapter 2, he already knew who had sent him. He was already assured. He was already confident that God was going to be the one to complete the good work. So we made our prayer to God, and because of them, we set a watch against them day and night. The word watch there is a guard. So they weren't oblivious to the fact that the enemies were there. They just were intentional about not engaging the enemy on his term and on his level. That's what they were not going to do. So they used the weapon of prayer, and they were watchful. Number 4, how do we respond to opposition during a season of building? Position people in strategic places who are ready to war, but continue the work. Continue the work. Whatever happens, continue the work. That's what you're going to have to give an account for, the work that you've been commissioned to do. Chapter 4, verse 13. Therefore, Nehemiah, positioned men behind the lower parts of the wall and at the openings. So those are strategic places. When you come to a gate, where do you go through? Unless you're trying to, I don't know, jump the fence or something, you're going to go to the entrance of the gate. And so he positioned people at strategic places. And I set the people according to their families with their swords, their spears, and their bows. So in this context of 2023, where we may not be fighting a physical enemy, we might be fighting a physical enemy, but let's say we're fighting one who is allowing themselves to be used by the enemy. How do we respond? What does this look like? Positioning people in strategic places. It looks like having people who will pray with you, people who can counsel you according to the word of God, people who can speak words of wisdom and words of life, especially when you're starting to get discouraged at the fact that this enemy is here as you are trying to build. So number 4, position people in strategic places. Strategic places who are ready to war, but continue to work. And the final lesson that I took from the book of Nehemiah about how to deal with opposition during a season of building, which is such a critical season. How something is built will determine how long it lasts. It will determine what is able to... Sorry guys, I'm literally next to a street, but it will determine so much. And so building and protecting yourself during that season of building is so critical. But number 5, do not be intimidated and do not engage. Trust God to strengthen you in every way. Don't lean on your own understanding. Trust God to strengthen you in every way. Chapter 6, 8 and 9. Then I sent to him my enemies, saying, no such things as you say are being done, but you invent them in your own heart. Sometimes people really are inventing things in their own heart and wanting you to engage with the story that they've created. And that's what happened. They had sent at four different times, they invited him to come and talk to them. And Nehemiah every single time was like, nope, not doing it, not doing it, not doing it, not doing it. Until the fifth time, Nehemiah was just like, you know what, let me respond. And that's the response he gave them. No such things as you say are being done. You're trying to make it seem like a rebellion is being planned, that I'm here to overthrow the king, that I'm rebuilding so that I'll have the opportunity to take over Jerusalem, or just whatever the case is. But no such thing as you say is being done. You're just inventing them in your own mind. Verse 9, for they were trying to make us afraid, saying, their hands will be weakened in the work and it will not be done. Now therefore, O God, strengthen my hands. Now therefore, O God, strengthen my hands. So that is what I have for you guys today. I know I kind of ran through it, but you guys can always listen to the replay. I will also be putting this up on YouTube. So the channel is live. I will let you guys know more information. If you type in Sincerely Stef, Stef with an F, S-T-E-F on YouTube, you should be able to find the channel. And I will put all of these uploads there over on YouTube. So you can watch on YouTube, make sure you subscribe, and you can also watch here on Instagram. And I'm just gonna resume all of the points, there's 5 of them, about how to deal with opposition when you're in a season of building. Number 1, know with certainty who has sent you and commissioned you, and declare victory boldly. That's what you need to do. Number 2, call upon God. Ask him to deal with your enemies. There is a privilege that we have being children of God. We don't have to fight our own battles. We can sit back and allow God to fight for us. That's what we should do. Number 3, use the weapon of prayer and be watchful. Don't ignore the fact that you may have enemies. Now, like I said, there was 2 conversations that led me to want to talk about this today. In the first conversation that I had with someone, they really did have people who were conspiring against them. They really did have people who were sitting down having conversations about how they were going to tear them down. And then in the second case, it was more so just an enemy of your progress, an enemy of what you were trying to accomplish in your life, and an enemy of your healing. That's what the second situation was. But in any case, use the weapons of prayer and be watchful. We're not going to be in like this fairy tale land acting as if they don't exist. They do exist, and we're going to respond in prayer. We're going to respond judging all things spiritually. Number 4, position people in strategic places who are ready to war, but don't stop the work. Continue to work. Now, who are these strategic people? These are people you can trust, people who you know have your back, people who can pray for you, encourage you as you are building. They are at the strategic places. The strategic places are your heart. The strategic places are your mind. The strategic places are your decision. Those are the strategic places where you need to position people. Before I make the decisions, I'm going to run it through, number 1, God, but I'm also going to run it through the counsel that he has placed around me. These are the people in strategic places. And number 5, do not be intimidated and do not engage. Trust God to strengthen you in every way. So that is my prayer for you today. If you are in a building season and you have found that there is opposition to your business, opposition to your family, opposition to your healing, your personal healing, opposition to your finances, opposition to your mental health, whatever the opposition is, do not be intimidated and do not engage the enemy on his terms and on his level. Anytime you do that, you are choosing to accept a demotion, because now you have to literally stop what you're doing, come down to his level and engage him how he wants to engage. And that's not what we're going to do. We're going to trust God to strengthen us in every way. So that is my prayer for you today. The second part of verse 9, chapter 6, verse 9. Now therefore, oh God, strengthen our hands. Strengthen your children's hands, because there's a work to be done, and by God's grace, it will be accomplished. So again, my name is Stephanie Kerr. That is what I have for you today. I hope that I was able to speak to you, encourage you, bless you, be a source of insight, revelation. Take a look at the book of Nehemiah. I specifically looked at, for the second section, chapters 4 to 13, but I actually talk about the whole book in this live. So take a look at that book. It is very instrumental if you happen to be in a building season. As always, I will leave you guys a couple minutes if you want to leave any comments or if you have any feedback. And outside of that, this live will be put on YouTube. Whoa. Will be put on YouTube at Sincerely Stef on YouTube. Stef, S-T-E-F with an F. All right, guys, so that is what I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for joining me live, for those who are able to join me live. And this live will be put up on my IG page, so you can go back and watch. So it doesn't look like there's any comments for today. So I'm going to say have an amazing weekend, and God bless you.